In the latter part of the 16th century, France showed a huge appetite for refinement. The royal court abandoned the Chateau of the Loire for newer, more ambitious constructions in the Paris region. King Charles IX's favorite palace was his chateau at Fontainebleau. He particularly liked the apartment of the Baths, whose decorations and prestigious works of art lauded the naked bodies of the ancient pantheon, glorifying their physical forms, helping the king and his inner circle to identify with these divinities. The pleasures of the senses mingled with those of the mind. The Renaissance had begun. But the period was full of contradictions. On the dark side lurked the profound and fanatical conflicts between Protestants and Catholics that were tearing the country asunder, as Charles IX, still in the clutches of his mother, the regent Catherine de Médicis, struggled to impose his authority. In the year 1571, in his Paris studio in Rue Sainte-Avoye, Francois Clouet, painter to the king, completed a very enigmatic painting, A Lady in Her Bath, which would become a masterpiece of the French Renaissance. What do we see? A naked lady glimpsed through an open curtain. Behind her, two distinct scenes separate the depth of the picture, aligned in successive frames. Each features another woman, the nursemaid and the maidservant. These areas are linked together by a knowing set of hands and gestures. What meaning are we to attribute to this painting by one of France's greatest portraitists? To find out, we must examine the elements and figures represented, unravel the secrets hidden behind the composition, and grasp both what the artist is telling us and hiding from us about the period, about its morals, and its fantasies. Clouet pushes aside the red curtains and invites us to witness the bathing. As in many portraits, the curtains create a second frame. But here, there is no doubt that they are part of the decor. The bathtubs, like the beds, are surrounded by curtains to protect from the cold and ultimately prying eyes. This setting is the bedroom, which in aristocratic households was more of a meeting place than a private sanctuary. In this composition, Clouet uses a very unusual device. In the Renaissance tradition, one half of a painting usually refers to the other. Let's take a closer look. Here, the opposite is true. If we split the picture vertically, on the right we have a portrait on a dark background framed with red curtains. And on the left, a genre scene featuring a nursemaid, a baby, and a maidservant. Let us then consider the picture as a genre scene, with its snapshots of daily life. Clouet has built it around three female archetypes: the mistress, the nursemaid, and the maidservant. This latter is relegated to the background near the fireside. With a weary look, she clutches a heavy jug filled with hot water, intended for the bath. Her movement is almost suspended, her right hand around the jug and her left hand resting on the handle, strangely echoing the position of the nursemaid holding the baby. Paintings of this period often depict servants in the background. Clouet's picture is reminiscent of certain Flemish works, which show similar continuity throughout their depth. In the middle distance, the nursemaid gazes back at us boldly. Her complexion is olive, her features expressive and cheerful. She breastfeeds the swaddled infant in a posture that mimics the bearing of the maidservant, while her bared breast echoes the lady's naked bosom. She is the hired breast that sustains the lady's newborn baby, the nourishing teat extolled by the poet Ronsard. Those twin pulses of thickly clotted milk ebb and flow through their white valley. The use of nursemaids was very common in cities, not only by well-off and wealthy parents, but also craftsmen and workers who happily sent their children to country parishes, just as long as the mother's meager wage was greater than the cost of the child's upkeep. The infant in the arms of the nursemaid is swathed from head to toe. With a large strip commencing above the chest, you execute 2 turns and convolutions, accommodating the arms along the sides, spreading them such that the hands approach the knees. In the end, the whole will be wrapped tightly, holding the child warmly and firmly. It was customary for a baby to remain a prisoner in this vice for several months, spending most of its time in a rocker bed, from which it would occasionally be plucked for feeding or changing. Finally, after its first year, it would be robed, meaning the boy or girl would be given its first robe. In the foreground, the sovereign woman, breast standing proud, nipple that puts to shame the rose, nipple more beautiful than anything. She offers a vague and distant look, seated in a bathtub made from chestnut wood, the bottom of which is covered in a sheet. Is clouet providing us with a glimpse of the hygiene customs of the day? Public baths, inherited from antiquity, had endured throughout the Middle Ages. Men and women mingled cheerfully in shared bathtubs. The bath was a sensual pleasure, and bathers often ate and drank while they soaked. In the early part of the century, in the name of morality, the Church spoke out against public baths, declaring them to be dens of iniquity, indecent places that promoted sin and the spread of disease. Gradually, then, bathing became a more private affair. Paradoxically, the second half of the 16th century saw paintings of baths on the increase. The posture of the lady in the bath, upright, hand placed on the edge of the tub, as if on an armrest of an armchair, brings to mind the Leonardo da Vinci drawing known as the Nude Gioconda, in which the Italian artist depicts a naked woman in the same pose as a Mona Lisa. The Mona Vanna was part of the royal collection and widely admired. There's no doubt it is at the origin of the nude beauty's fashion that a lady in her bath belonged to. Physical beauty reflects an inner beauty. As a result, certain women in the court had themselves depicted nude in a mythological or a daily context. Diane de Poitiers, mistress to Henry II, the father of King Charles IX, had herself painted as Diana the Huntress in a display of idealized nudity. And the Neoplatonic beauty of Gabrielle d'Estrées, the favorite of Charles IX's successor, would be celebrated in a bath alongside her sister, pinching her nipple. Painters were not above using the iconographical motif of the bath to display the curves of the female anatomy under the pretense of naivete. They drew inspiration from mythological or biblical episodes, such as the birth of Venus, the bath of Diana, or Susanna and the Elders, supposedly removing the body from the ordinary world, where subjecting it to nudity would be a humiliation. Charles Charles IX, immersed in his bath of chamomile, melilot, artemisia, fennel, sage, mint, and marjoram, could contemplate at his leisure the pictures of the royal apartment of baths at Fontainebleau, painted by the Italian artist Primatice. Diane and her bath with nymphs, Venus joining Mars in his bathtub, Jupiter taking on the appearance of Diana to slip into the bath of Callisto. Primatice painted these works for Francois I, Charles IX's grandfather, who was eager to rival the splendor of the Italian court. Primatice had arrived in Fontainebleau some 40 years earlier. The chateau was at that time filled with exuberance. Francois I had razed the previous construction to the ground in order to erect a new one, and summoned a vast array of Italian painters and sculptors to work on the decorations. Primatice soon took charge of artistic direction, overseeing much of the interior decoration and dreaming up a series of festive scenes. Construction of the Ulysses Gallery, which began under Francois I, carried on until the reign of Charles IX. Thus was born the School of Fontainebleau, of which Primatice was one of the undisputed masters. The Primatice style revolutionized French art, combining Italian mannerism with epic heroism. His influence spread throughout Europe. The picture of Clouet is profoundly marked by this movement, and more precisely by canvases such as the Venus of Urbino, painted by Titian. But he preserves his own style and maintains his Flemish influence, while some of his contemporaries were carried away with the more showy and extravagant elements of the Transalpine masters, such as citrus tones and extreme perspectives. A number of works flirted with vulgar eroticism, reflecting a muddled understanding of the Italian Renaissance. The chambers and apartment of the baths sometimes housed collections of suggested drawings and other erotic paintings that featured indulgent displays of female nakedness to stimulate the senses. It is said that the gallery of the Count de Chateauvillain included a very beautiful picture portraying extremely beautiful ladies in their bath, touching, handling, feeling, stroking, and groping each other, all in a tangle, and furthermore, combing each other's hair so agreeably, so properly, showing everything, that it would warm and excite the coldest recluse or hermit. Clouet must have been all too aware that his lady would arouse strong feelings, but he plays on the contrasting tranquility of the domestic setting. In keeping with the Renaissance taste for complexity, he scatters his composition with details, which can be interpreted as a series of ambivalent symbols. The unicorn embroidered into the back of the chair near the fireplace, a symbol of purity, challenges the idea that this is a sensual and erotic interpretation. Likewise, the paleness of the lady's skin, with her eyes turned away. But the mirror above the chair can be seen as a characteristic of Venus, or a symbol of vanity. The apparent greed of the young boy may be interpreted as a representation of Cupid. The carnation in the lady's hand might be the flower of love, but some people see it as a rebus of the painter's name in Flemish. The carnation is the fleur cou. The picture remains an impenetrable mystery, and it being regarded as a genre scene has led to many misguided interpretations. Let us slip through the window and leave this peaceful room to discover the tumult and brutal conflict outside, pitching Protestants against Catholics. 3 bloody religious wars had already been fought within the space of 8 years, fueled by a child king and a regent who was undermining his power. Catherine de' Medici attempted to find a position of reconciliation, permitting freedom of conscience and worship for Protestants, provided they reinstated the churches they had seized and held their services beyond the city walls. But this civil tolerance did not produce the desired effect, because beyond the actual religious disputes, 3 large families of nobles, the Bourbons, the Guises, and the Montmorencys, were using their faith as a pretext to stir up conflict, the better to control royal power. Catholic Spain and Protestant England were likewise interfering in the conflict in an attempt to undermine the Kingdom of France. However, since August of the previous year, a fragile truce had held. Peace had temporarily broken out. Let's return to Clouet's studio and look at the picture as a portrait. In the light of what is being played out beyond its walls, let's see if we can identify the young woman in the portrait. Let's take a closer look at the lady's hairstyle and features. She looks a lot like the Catholic Queen Mary Stuart in another portrait by Clouet. This particular argument wasn't aired until the mid-20th century, supported by the presence of a unicorn in the Queen of Scotland's coat of arms. Mary Stuart was, some years earlier, briefly Queen of France by her marriage to Francois II, brother of Charles IX, who died a year later. Catholic Mary Stuart was accused of all manner of wrongdoing by Protestants. Considered by the Holy See to be the legitimate heir to the throne of England in place of the excommunicated Elizabeth, the bastard, Mary was reviled by the Huguenots, who saw in her the embodiment of a corrupt Vatican. This would make Clouet's picture a political satire rather than an homage. Disparaging nudity, a fruit bowl symbolizing sensual greed, the carnation, symbol of numerous betrothals, and the ironic presence of the unicorn. But who would have commissioned such a work? Only a Protestant, a high-ranking figure in the court. Francois de Montmorency, for example, a wealthy patron of the arts and a member of Charles IX's council, who urged an alliance with the English. Could Clouet take the liberty of painting such an irreverent picture of the king's sister-in-law? Perhaps. Charles IX reportedly said of Mary Stuart, "The poor madwoman will never cease until she loses her head. I see it as her own fault and folly." We know about the king's fondness for Clouet, whom he nicknamed Jeannet. Catherine de' Medici was his greatest admirer and most faithful client. She appreciated his delicate touch, transparent flesh tones, and the serene expression of his faces. Jeannet captured the true picture and true features. The regent was responsible for Francois I's education, teaching him that a good patron of the arts did not associate payment with how the work was carried out. She decided to increase Clouet's permanent annuity, and she went in person to his Paris studio to announce the news. But whatever freedom and protection Jeannet enjoyed, there is nothing to support the theory that the mysterious lady is Mary Stuart. The picture is too peaceful and the lady too beautiful. There is no sign of accusation or mockery. Let us now focus on the lady's body. It appears to be a stereotypical representation, closer to idealized perfection than to a realistic portrait. For this body, Francois Clouet maintained the antique ideal, as though he recomposed a body from its constituent parts, like Ronsard in Ode to Janet, addressed to him as a tribute. In this poem, Ronsard asks the artist to paint the object of his affections naked. He recommends that the painter desist from flattering his mistress. She has no need of flattery. Before meticulously itemizing, through his verse, the woman's body from her hair all the way down to her toes. Ronsard attributes to his mistress the elbows and arms of Juno, the beautiful fingers of Minerva, and the belly of Venus. The woman's beauty is fragmented, her body cut up by words. With her gleaming, white, lustrous forehead, the lady in the bath would have pleased the author Machiavelli, who demanded that a forehead be pure and bright enough to allow Narcissus to be reflected in it. The woman becomes a mirror with the sole purpose of reflecting the onlooking male. One had to be beautiful at all costs. Beside the lady in the bath are some herbs to maintain the freshness of her complexion, a major element of seduction. The 16th century saw a boom in cosmetics and beauty care products. These secrets of cuisine were very fashionable with the ladies at court. Pamphlets on beauty were printed in pocket-size format. Perfumers and apothecaries strove to outdo each other in finding ingenious ways to offer women the key to eternal beauty and infinite youth. Some treatments had been around since antiquity, such as bathing in the milk of a she-ass, of which Cleopatra was a keen proponent. Others were more experimental and turned out to be dangerous, such as quicksilver face masks made from nothing more than mercury. In attempting to meet the cutthroat canons of beauty, it was a case of anything goes. Pigeons stuffed with solid silver, pearls dissolved in lemon juice, gloves of honey, nocturnal masks, bandaged breasts, whale semen, pigeon excrement, red slugs, turpentine, bat's blood, lead carbonate, silver sublimate, ant eggs, all of it creamed together with saliva. Among the most famous sellers of secrets during this period was a celebrated Nostradamus, summoned by the court by Catherine de Médicis. The apothecary is better known for his prophecies than for his cuisine. While his predictions about the end of the world met with great success during this period of religious conflict, some regarded him as a charlatan and rejected his science drawn from astrological studies. Several times, Nostradamus was forced to flee his enemies, who were jealous of the excessive influence he wielded over the regent. But what Francois Clouet's picture does not show, in the guise of a romantic painting, echoes the religious strife that was tearing the country asunder. Nudity was an important issue. By the time Clouet had finished the picture, the Fourth War of Religion had broken out, climaxing with the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of Protestants. Between Protestants and Catholics, one-upmanship prevailed in matters of virtuousness. Personal hygiene and the act of stripping became the object of keen suspicion. And yet, throughout the century, bodies filled out after years of famine and rickets as the era celebrated this carnal beauty under the influence of antiquity and humanism. But at the same time, religion shackled these bodies, hiding them behind veils and clothes. The work of Clouet testifies to the refinement and ambivalence of a period in which contradictions gave rise to the despotic canons of beauty.